Welcome back to the Classic and Current Gaming Podcast, a weekly podcast where we look at the history and development of video games. I'm your host, RxDude22, and we're well into Season 4 now of the podcast, where we're exploring games that may not be on a lot of people's radars, but they're games that I personally do enjoy. This week we head back to the Super Nintendo console for the second straight week. It's a space shooting game. It's got multiple variations of it. Originally came out on the NES, was originally an arcade game. This is the third installment of the series. Today we're going to look at Gradius III. Gradius III is a 1989 scrolling shooter video game developed and published by Konami. Originally released for the arcades in Japan and other parts of Asia on December 11, 1989. It is the third game in the Gradius series. The game was ported to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in Japan in 1990 and North America in 1991, and served as a launch title for the system in North America. The arcade version would never see the light of day in the West until it was included alongside Gradius IV in a 2-in-1 compilation, Gradius 3 and 4, for the PlayStation 2, and in the Gradius Collection for the PlayStation Portable. Gameplay. The player pilots the Vic Viper starfighter to battle the onslaughts of the Bacterian Empire. There are a total of 10 levels in the game, with Stage 4 being something of a bonus level. Here the player controls the Vic Viper in a third-person perspective and must avoid colliding with walls. Though the level is completely devoid of any enemies, free-floating power-ups are scattered throughout. There are also 2 hidden levels that are based on the earlier sections of Gradius and Salamander. The game contains the familiar weapons, level layouts, and enemies that have become trademarks of the series. Like the Japanese versions of previous games in the series, Gradius III does not include a continuation feature. If the player loses their lives, the game will be over. The Japanese version of the game contains a beginner mode that allows the player to venture through the first 3 levels at a much easier difficulty. At the end of the 3rd level, the game will bid the player to try the game again at the normal difficulty, technical mode, which can loop endlessly. The Asian, non-Japanese arcade release lacks the beginner mode and retrospective introduction sequence, but reduces the difficulty overall. In addition to new predefined weapon schemes, Gradius III introduces the Edit mode. Players can mix and match missile, double, laser, shield, and special power-ups into their own custom combination. Some of the weapons available in the predefined schemes cannot be used in custom schemes, and vice versa. Release. A port of Gradius III was released for the Super Famicom in Japan in December 1990, and for the Super NES in North America in 1991, with the option of reduced difficulty and additional arrangements for the Vic Viper. It replicates the slowdown of its arcade counterpart and discards the pseudo 3D and Crystal Cube brush stages. The Cell stage is also swapped to be the final stage instead of the 6th stage like in the arcade version. It is also given a whole new layout and soundtrack. It also introduces a boss called Beacon, which awaits the player at the end of the new High Speed stage, which is a counterpart of the High Speed stage in Gradius II. The Super NES version of the game suffered from severe slowdown. In 2019, Brazilian computer engineer Victor Villa created a ROM hack version of the game that uses the SA1 enhancement chip that eliminates the slowdown in the game. Unlike the original arcade version, the Super NES port is the only one that allows players to continue when they lost all their lives. A harder difficulty called Arcade can be unlocked by inputting a code, quickly tapping the A button 16 times in 1 second on the option screen. However, it is simply the same game at a harder difficulty, and not an accurate port of the arcade version. This port was also released for the Virtual Console on April 23, 2007 in North America, and in September 2007 in Europe and Japan. A soundtrack containing the original music as well as arranged tracks was released by Konami on the King Records label on February 21, 1990, composed and performed by Kukila Club with Miki Hagashino. Additionally, several albums containing arrangements of the music from this game were released in the years to follow. Konami also released a soundtrack album containing music from Gradius III, as well as other Gradius games entitled Gradius Arcade Soundtrack on April 24, 2002. The Gradius III Symphonic Poetry track was released by Kukiki Club on June 5, 1990, and contains many orchestrated tracks from both Gradius III and numerous previous games. A prime example of its diversity is the Final Battle track, which contains numerous variations on the Crystal World and boss battle tracks in Gradius II, Gopher's Ambition. In 2000, Konami bundled Gradius III and Gradius IV together for release on the PlayStation 2 video game console as Gradius 3 and 4. The port is based on the arcade version and has an unlockable extra edit mode, which gives the player the freedom to create a weapon array from all included setups and adds the F option, R option, and Reduce 2 power-ups found in the Super NES port. The Reduce from the SNES port returns the player one step closer to the Vic Viper's original size when hit, giving it protection from 2 hits. As the PlayStation 2 hardware is more capable than the game's original arcade hardware, in certain technologically demanding moments of the game, the PlayStation 2 is able to maintain normal operating speed in situations that would normally introduce slowdown, half-speed operation on the original hardware. To recreate this gameplay characteristic, KCET implemented an optional weight level regulator that can be adjusted from 3 levels at any point in the game, beginning from 0 to 2, the original rate. While the PS2 version doesn't have the option to continue as the Super NES version, it features the possibility to select any stage the player has cleared. Gradius III was later ported to the PlayStation Portable in 2006 as part of Gradius Collection. This version keeps the tradition of not allowing the player to continue after exhausting all reserve ships. Reception. In Japan, Game Machine listed Gradius III on their January 15, 1990 issue as being the 3rd most successful table arcade unit of the month. Gradius III received positive to favorable reviews. IGN gave the game a score of 8.5 out of 10 for impressive graphics and gameplay. GameSpot gave the score 7 out of 10 for the Virtual Console and criticizing the game for its high difficulty. On release, the Super Famicom version of the game was scored a 33 out of 40 by a panel of 4 reviewers at Famicom Shushin. According to GamePro's The Feature Creature, Gradius III is one of the most durable side-scrolling shooters. It wasn't a breakthrough when it came out in 1991, but it did approximate the great arcade shooters pretty well. Entertainment Weekly gave the game a C and remarked that it was similar to previous Gradius games and thus not worth investing $50 for. Super Gamer reviewed the SNES version and gave an overall score of 78%, stating, Gradius 3 incorporates all of the features that make for a great arcade game. In 2018, Complex ranked Gradius 3 46th on their best Super Nintendo games of all time. IGN rated Gradius 3 45th in its top 100 SNES games. They praised the visuals, the environments, and bosses, saying, a true sight to behold. All information in the podcast this week was provided by Wikipedia. And that'll conclude episode 61 of the Classic and Current Gaming Podcast. You can check out the podcast in several different forms. We have a video presentation each week on YouTube, which also includes gameplay video to watch along while you listen to the podcast. Or you can just listen to the podcast through Spotify or your other favorite listening channel as well. We'll be back next week with yet another classic game. It's been RxDude22 from the Classic and Current Gaming Podcast signing out. Keep on gaming. See you on the next stream. Be good to each other. And you'll see and hear me on the podcast next week. Everyone have a great day. Thank you for listening or watching. And we'll see you next time. Take care now.